Good evening and welcome once again to Have We Got Values for You? Thank you all very much indeed for joining us. Can I make the usual reminder to consider making a donation to charity, either a local charity of your choice or one of the charities we support, which include Brian May's Save Me Trust, GoFundMe Ukraine, Shelter for the Housing Crisis, or one of the energy crisis charities in lieu of a registration fee. We're very, very pleased this evening to welcome to us Stacey Robbins. Stacey, good evening. Head of Planning District Council, prolific user of LinkedIn, even you almost as much as Chris. More of that later. And engaged with the show and us on several occasions, and we're really greatly pleased finally to have you on. So the usual questions, Stacey. Where are you joining us from? What, if anything, you're drinking? Perhaps what would you like to drink might be an even more adequate, powerful question, because I know you've had a long day. What would you like? And what have you chosen for the theme for this evening?
So, hello, and hopefully you can hear me because I've had some technical issues. So I'm joining you from Hailsham, which is our offices, the Wealden District Council offices, and I'm still at work. So although I do have a drink here, I'm not allowed to open it, but I can talk about it. So hopefully you're going to see that. I'm going to be drinking later a beer called Long Blonde, which probably sounds a bit like a 70s pin-up, but it isn't. It is from the Longman Brewery in Wilmington, which is just outside Wealden, on the slopes of the South Downs on the southern scarp to Wealden. But I'm going to enjoy that a little bit later on. In terms of the theme, if I can slide into that, I chose county flags. So there you go. So I thought it might be interesting for people to display the flag where they're talking from, and then promptly went onto a well-known online retailer and bought a flag, Sussex flag. But it's huge. It's absolutely enormous. So that's the first gaffe of mine today. And although I think I might have downloaded it as a background, I'll try and check it in a moment. So ours is blue. It's got 5 Sussex markets on it, and it's the proud Sussex flag.
Fantastic, Stacey. Well, that's, if you're thinking it's all gone a bit pear-shaped, that's not my usual week. But that's the flag of Worcestershire, because though I claim to be a Brummy, which I identify as, I actually brought up on just inside Worcestershire, and their symbol is, which I didn't actually know, was the pear. So there we are. Well, Stacey, as I say, thank you again for joining us. We're hugely looking forward to my interview with you after the second half of the show. As I say to all our guests, and you may be particularly well placed actually, if there's anything you'd like to comment on amongst the various news pieces and case reports that the others do, please do chip in, and that would be great. But equally, no obligation to, and you understand if you've had a heck of a day. If you don't. Now, let me introduce the rest of the panel, which I forgot to do last time, and I'm very pleased to say I've remembered to do this time. Result. Sasha, how are you? You've changed your camera or something. Now the angle in your room looks rather different.
I know. I've moved my room around. So yeah, I've moved my room. It's the time for change. December. I thought I might be having a new MPPF, so I thought that. And I Stacey will know, someone who will remain nameless got a county wrong the other day. And in county flags, following that tradition, I've got my county flag here. Oh no, sugar. It's not.
I can't think which Paul Tucker you're talking about.
So I'm in London, and I'm really looking forward to tonight's show with Stacey. And as I bored Stacey rigid, I spent my junior years at the planning bar in Wealden, enjoying very much the beautiful part of the country that it is.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sash. Mary, better go to you next. In the woods. You're on mute.
Oh. Good evening, everyone. Hello from the wild woods of Wandsworth. I am very well, thank you, but I'm being very good and I'm drinking tea at this moment. But unsurprisingly to some of you, I brought the Cornish flag with me. You've seen this before. I have a little holiday home, but I'm going to end up living there, I think, in due course for quite a long time. So that's me, and I'm looking forward to the show too.
Thanks, Mary. Paul, Oh,
I've gone one step beyond anybody. I've actually come to my home county. I was hopefully going to be able to say that I was going to broadcast from my mother's house in North Yorkshire in Scarborough. However, the wind and the rain has forced me to be by the side of the road, and I'm in the charming village of Cloughton, which everybody mispronounces Cloughton or Cluton or something, but it's Cloughton, by the side of the road, causing traffic jams. And my county flag will be all over. You just need to look all the way around you. Welcome to the North Riding of Yorkshire. And hello, sir.
Thanks, Paul, as ever, our mobile correspondent. And I'm not sure Chris is with us at the moment, but when he does, given he was also born in Worcestershire, he'll probably accuse me of cultural appropriation. And I got in there first. Anyway, let's go straight to the news item, which I think, Paul, you're going to cover. So back to you.
Well, yes. I mean, the suggestion was made by my wife that I was reliving the trip to Bethlehem, and that's the reason why I've come back to North Yorkshire, given the Christmas season. But happily, she's not with me nor pregnant. So, in terms of the news, the first and most important thing to bear in mind is the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act is now in force. However, there's lots and lots of detail that's missing, and it needs secondary legislation. I'm going to big up to Mary's firm, because Mary's firm has put out a fantastic briefing note in relation to it, which is available online and in an inbox near you. So this is shamelessly cribbed, Mary. So thank you very much to yourself, Simon, and your team. So there's I think about three areas of interest in relation to it. The first of which is it's introducing a power to introduce new national development management policies, which I hope will massively speed up the process of examination, because you won't need to repeat them. That's number one. Secondly, there is the Dreamboat, the searching for unicorns part of it, which is plans are now, as a matter of law, going to go through in 30 months. The magic wand has been waved. Well, partly that's caused by the development management policies being introduced nationally. Secondly, the abolition of the duty to cooperate and the supposed flexible alignment policy, which is going to be an MPPF, whatever that means. There's going to be the requirement for gateway checks for local plans. Again, don't we do that anyway? The Secretary of State can direct that authorities make joint plans. That'll speed things up no end. See Gloucestershire. And we're going to reduce consultation from 6 weeks to 3 weeks, and a greater reliance upon the written process. Be warned, a greater reliance upon the written process does not necessarily mean we will have a greater degree of scrutiny. There's going to be other stuff, such as design codes, which is an interesting and important matter, and SPDs are now going to be supplementary plans. So that's the first bit of news. Second bit of news, no more free goes, anyone. So anything that's been refused after the 6th of December, or you've appealed after the 6th of December, you've got to pay your fee if you want to have another pop at it. MPPF, not yet drafted. I've got a whole section about what was going to be said about MPPF. Joanna Overley said some interesting things about we may get things in two parts. We may see something this side of Christmas and something at the other side of Christmas. Hopefully MPPF's not going to be split in two, but who knows? One does suspect that there's been a delay because the government only has so much bandwidth and there's other things going on, I'm told. And then the fourth thing in relation to news, because number 3 is not really a news item, is more and more intervention by both the courts and by the Secretary of State in sort of forcing authorities to plan make. So you may have seen that Wrexham lost a case in the High Court in Cardiff, where Mr. Justice Eyre said it was essentially not rational for Wrexham not to move to adopt their plan just because councillors didn't fancy adopting their plan for reasons which appear to be mostly political. But it's not just the courts telling them, it's also the Secretary of State. So the Secretary of State has intervened in Errolwash, which is in Derbyshire, my second home county, where after a change of political control, councillors said, we don't fancy the other side's plans. And the Secretary of State wrote to them and said, right, I'm intervening to decide whether or not you have literally wasted tens of thousands of pounds of public money. And you will recall that that's part of a theme, because the last time this happened was really South Oxfordshire, but Spelthorne back in September had tried to withdraw their plan from examination, and the Secretary of State said, oh no you don't, you've wasted an awful lot of money getting to this stage, let's get the thing through. So it may be we're seeing a sea change in government to say you really do need to plan, because that's where the system is broken and that's where we need to bring things forward first. So that's the news. Obviously other news and other news channels are available, but we're the best and the first. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. And as you say, maybe if we finally get the MPPF, it may be that that theme of plan making is continued. I'm starting to wonder, when we had Joanna Averley on the show earlier in the year, she said it would come out in spring, and somebody said which spring, whether that wasn't portentous, but we shall soon see. Now, Sasha, you're going to tell us about a case in Southwark. So
I absolutely am. Thank you, Charlie. Yep, not too far from where I'm currently sitting, just across the Thames. And we should welcome Christopher, who has battled through the elements of Gloucestershire to get here tonight.
It's quite a distance from Dover to Cheltenham, it turns out.
Good. Well, now I'm going to talk about Southwark, yes, and I'm going to talk about a case, Elephant Park, which was decided by, I don't know if Rob has it up on the screen. Thank you, Rob. This is a decision of the 30th of November, a week ago, a decision of Paul Griffiths. This involves a large development of office floor space in the form of an 18-storey building. And interestingly, officer recommendation turned down by members who particularly had concerns on two grounds: daylight sunlight on the effect of the surrounding residential development, and the second concern was about the design, because it's a shame. If I was diligent like Chris, I would have a plan, a photo of the design, but it's an interesting steel and wood timber, I think is the technical term, structure. But there was also a third concern, which was made by the Rule 6 party, which was interestingly made up, as I understand it, of residents who had historically occupied the land in the form of a previous council estate that had been subject to redevelopment. So the inquiry took place in the context of three parties: the developer, the local authority, and a Rule 6 party made up of these local residents. Now, in relation to the principle of the use, the local residents promoted a case that effectively, as the historic use had been residential, there should only be residential considered on the site. And the inspector took the view that that was not actually correct, and particularly in light of the London plan designation of this site falling within a CAS, an opportunity area, and a major town centre. And simply put, the inspector took the view that the office use would be compatible with the development plan. The second issue in relation to design, this is very interesting, because what is quite clear is that the inspector felt that the proposed design was of very high quality. And I think this decision really reinforces the importance of design in such schemes. And the inspector took the view that it was very high quality, and also noteworthy, visited other schemes of the architects proposed, Acme, who were the designers and the architects of the scheme. And I think he saw comfort, and got that comfort from the quality that they had exhibited at other sites. And therefore, the overall conclusion clearly was that it was a striking, a very high quality design. The third argument was daylight sunlight. And I think this is really important for those of you involved in the promotion of urban sites. And as we all know, the problems with the historic guidance, BRE guidance, does depend on suburban standards. And always the discussion is about how they should be adapted or amended for much more urban settings. And in this case, the inspector took the view that this was a very important regeneration site, and the impacts of daylight that were proposed are not surprising or extreme when you consider the context of the site. And his conclusions were, in the light of the policy background, encouraging significant regeneration, the loss of daylight and the visual impacts that would arise would not be unacceptable. So pragmatic, understandable, and frankly, very sensible approach to daylight in the centre of London, and a real endorsement of the design. So well done, both the developers for seeking an architect who endorsed a very strong approach, and the architect for getting it right. Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks very much, Sasha. Now, next up, we're going to cover a case concerning a prison, HMP Gartree. So it gives me great pleasure to say, Chris Young, go to jail, do not pass go, do not collect £200.
That's a shame. I was rather hoping you'd say that. Flags, I may be late from my examination in your part of the world, Stacey, but I haven't got my effort. I thank my daughter for providing this. This is the Gloucestershire flag. I don't know if you can quite see the colours. Green for our beautiful green countryside, blue for the River Severn, and yellow for the Cotswold Stone. So I'm going to talk about the other thing about being away at this time of the year is you come back and you can get loads of chocolates out of your chocolate calendar because you haven't had them for a few days. So if you see me, because I haven't eaten anything since I left over, I'll just be nibbling chocolates for the rest of the show. So this is an appeal about a prison, and the applicant was obviously the Ministry of Justice, and the determining body was not the Minister for Justice, but actually the Secretary of State for Levelling Up. And as we can see, there was an inquiry held back in October 2022. The inspector, H. Butcher, recommended refusal in respect of this case. It's a huge prison. You'll know that there is already a prison at Gartree, but this one was 2.5 times larger, and it was for Category B prisoners, who I guess are not the most serious, but still probably quite frightening. And it's 82,555 square metres of new prison. And if we go forward, we can see that that is the area to be covered. That is a vast part of the countryside in the rather nice Harborough district. And because I am organised, Sasha, that's very kind of you. We can see what was proposed in the next photo. Thank you to Howard Leaderhead, who acted for the local authority in this case, for directing me to where I could find some photos. So that's a fairly substantial development in the countryside, we might think. And the inspector found against it in respect of sustainability. Obviously, the prisoners aren't going anywhere. They're not getting on the bus. But all the people who come to visit them need to get there. And so that was a major issue in the case. And obviously, as you can probably tell, the landscape impact, because those are not bungalows. And as a consequence of which, the inspector actually decided it was too much for the location and recommended refusal. But it was a Secretary of State case. So if we go to the next section, the inspector recommended it be dismissed. Secretary of State agreed with the inspector about everything apart from the recommendation. Well, not quite. Acknowledged the harm. So it wasn't a case of disagreeing with the harm. And of course, the Secretary of State won't have gone to the site. So didn't disagree with the harm, but actually decided the need was so important that it outweighed the harm and the issue in terms of the harm by sustainability. If we go forward, we can see that there was a shortfall. This is looking a bit like a housing case, isn't it? And I suppose, in a way, prisons are a way of housing people. And as you can see, there was expected to be a deficit of 1,400 places by 2026. And then there were variations as to how much there would be a further deficit. And Mr. Smith was the witness who appeared on behalf of the Ministry of Justice. If we go forward again, the local MP had been a member, had been a minister in the Department for Levelling Up, but that ceased 3 months before the inquiry. We've had quite a few changes of ministers, as you might have noticed. And so what he did was investigate the need for prison places, and he said the forecasts were significantly lower than when the project had initially been identified, and as a consequence of which, there was less need for the prison, and those representations continued after the inquiry. If we go forward again, the Secretary of State grapples with this. This is, as I say, housing numbers for prisoners, part of the institutional population for those who are enthusiastic about this topic, and it's obviously based on a range of factors. You only get a prison cell if you really work hard for it and you've been on the waiting list. But they range between the prison population, 93,100 and 106,000. So it's quite a variation on what they think will happen with the prison population. And Mr. O'Brien, the MP, was continuing to make representations about the level of uncertainty, suggesting that the prison didn't need to be built, wasn't needed on the basis of the need figures. If we go forward again, Secretary of State agreed with the inspector that the new prison would cause harm to the character and appearance of the surrounding area, notably harm to the rural setting of the Gartree estate, but in the end decided to grant planning permission. Now, what I think is interesting about this is imagine we were to have a different Secretary of State in about a year's time, this is precisely what we would see. If inspectors are continuing to refuse on the basis of landscape impact or sustainability, we would see the Secretary of State, no doubt, obtaining or calling in and recovering decisions like this, and then reaching these type of conclusions, accepting the harm, but saying the need for housing would outweigh it. So it's quite an interesting case as a parallel to what might happen if there's a more positive environment about housing in the future. I think if we just go forward again, there was a whole debate about the charging for electric vehicles and whether that was sustainability. And again, these are all the debates we have for other types of development. Charlie knows all about charging spaces for the cars in some of the developments he's done. And we get this debate, charging for electric cars doesn't make an unsustainable location sustainable. But again, Secretary of State felt that overall the development was needed and therefore was less concerned about the sustainability issues of a huge new prison in the middle of the countryside. I think if we just go forward, there was a debate about alternative sites, and if you think about it, there's probably quite a few alternative sites you could put a prison in a similar kind of context to this, i.e. most of the country. And the Ministry of Justice had done some alternative site searching, but the inspector didn't give that very much weight, felt there was plenty of opportunity where a new prison could go in another location. But remember, this isn't Greenbelt, this isn't AOMB, so it wasn't a case of needing to look at that. The Secretary of State tried to suggest, for the Ministry of Justice tried to suggest that it supported the case for why the prison should be here, that there are a lack of alternatives, but the inspector was having none of that. Secretary of State similarly gave it very little weight. Okay, and if we just go forward, we can see the teams there. It was Robert Wealden who acted for the appellant, unsuccessful at persuading the inspector, but successful ultimately on behalf of the Secretary of State. And I don't know if we've got the appearances for the other teams. Howard, lead head of this parish, acted for the local authority, and Jack Barber. And I have heard suggestions today that there might be a High Court challenge by the residents. That's still being looked at. That inevitably happens sometimes when an inspector makes one recommendation and the Secretary of State goes the other way, because then you can forensically examine. Well, no, we're not meant to be forensic, are we? But look in detail at the evidence that separates the decision maker from the recommendation. There you go. I'm going to eat some chocolate.
Thanks, Chris. Now, before
I was going to say, Charlie, sorry, just very quickly jump in. If there's no comment about Chris's actual case, H. Butcher is pretty certain Inspector Haley Butcher, and I can say with first-hand authority from a recent inspector site visit that Haley Butcher is scared of cows, because we had a site visit which scared her. She was concerned about going into a particular field. And I won't say if she fell over on that site visit, and I won't say if I laughed.
Sounds like you're going to get an appeal allowed against you with costs.
Yes, that's quite a submission to make, Stacey. She wrote a very good report in that case. That's what I'm saying.
I have run away from cows in the site visit in the past in rather comical fashion, so she's in very good company. I'm in very good company. Now, if you'd asked me prior to Sasha circulating the script for this week's show a few days ago, what is a multi-fuel extension project, I would have said I haven't got a Scooby. Now, if you are in the same state of ignorance as I was a few days ago, Mary Cook is going to enlighten you.
Thank you very much, Charlie, for that very generous introduction. So I'm going to whisk you away to the Slough trading estate. And this story begins a little while back when the SSE, who you'll see her here with the applicant for the DCO consent, they started off with a planning permission which they originally obtained under the Town and Country Planning Act, which was for an energy from waste facility. And they expected that to be able to process 48,000 tonnes of waste-derived fuels and so generate 49.9 megawatts of electricity. We know how much the country needs electricity, don't we? And keen observers will recognise that onshore projects of 50 megawatts or more are treated as nationally significant infrastructure projects under Section 15 of the Planning Act, for which a development consent order must be sought. And so it came to be that in September 2022, after the planning application was in fact implemented, and whilst the construction therefore was well underway, an application was made under Section 37 of the 2008 Act to increase the threshold of the electricity generation so as to take it up to 60 megawatts. And they had to do that by way of a development consent order. And Rob, I think, has a picture just to help you, Charlie, understand. You can see there the consented scheme, edged in grey, consented under the original 1990 Act permission. And the only external difference between that consented scheme and the application for the DCO related to pipe work. And I've got there an illustration of the eastern elevation, which gives you a clue as to how virtually everything about this proposed extension related to what was going on inside the buildings that had already been permitted. So, in fact, thanks very much, Rob. The issues in this case were really about air quality, dust and odour, noise, vibration, transport, and habitat regulation assessments. And although originally there were a number of, I think, neighbours on the Slough Trading Estate who were concerned about this, in the end, as I read the report, the examination, that these issues were overcome. And that was because, as I say, the vast majority of the works to achieve the increase in capacity were confined to what was going on in the permitted boiler house and the wind turbine. And so really what was left was the issue about the habitat regs. And the decision maker came to the view that an appropriate assessment was not required because no additional stack emissions above the consented scheme were going to be generated by the extension, and that the air quality impacts would fall below the 1% threshold of the critical level / load threshold, which Natural England identified as denoting imperceptible impacts. I say that, Stacey, for your benefit, because that, of course, was one of the issues that brought about the demise of the Wealden local plan last time round. Anyway, we also have a paragraph which gives you, Rob, do you have this? The overall planning balance. I'm taking a lead out of Chris Young's approach. And so you can see here the way the Secretary of State approached the overall question of the planning balance, weighing, as it were, the benefits and the fact that there were no identified adverse impacts arising from the proposed development. And so, unsurprisingly, the Secretary of State concluded that the development consent order should be granted. And it was. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mary. There you go, folks. Multi-fuel extension projects. Let's have more of them. Now, it's time for the interview. Stacey, welcome again. Where are you on screen?
I'm here.
Here we are. There we are. That's Teams playing up. And so you're now obviously head of planning and environment at Wealden, but the journey started in Streatham Vale. It took a path via Sheffield and Cheltenham, Chris's hometown.
That's right.
So tell us about that. Tell us how the journey began and the various twists and turns before you ended up in your current role.
So you'll have to bear with me though, because I have had a rough day. But playing with today. We started at 10 and didn't finish till 3, and including taking members into closed session to give legal advice. So I'm a bit wobbly, perhaps. But anyway, yes, you are right, Charlie, that I was born in London. We lived in council housing, Lambeth at that point, but did later move to Wandsworth. I read planning at Sheffield University, did an undergrad, did a diploma. Quick fact, Graham Stallwood of Superstar Pins fame was on the same course as me. And Graham wasn't the corporate beast that you all know now. Let's just say he used to drift into lectures quite late, if you know what I mean. When I graduated from Sheffield, I actually had a job at Wealden straight away. Did almost a year, not quite. Then moved to Gloucestershire, went to Cheltenham Borough Council, where I spent very nearly 6 years or so in development control, as it was then. Had a very solid grounding in planning, worked with some absolutely fantastic colleagues, many of which I'm still in contact with now. Trusted by senior managers to have a go and get involved in complicated cases at that time. We were led by a brilliant, now long retired DC manager by the name of Rob Lindsay, who gave us all an absolutely fantastic grounding in planning. We didn't know at the time that he was teaching us probably the best grounding in planning. We used to tease him mercilessly, but we should have appreciated him a bit more. I'm very grateful to his teachings and often drawn on some of the principles that he taught us on most days. Left Cheltenham to come back to Sussex and rejoined Wealden in 2006 and been here ever since. I think I've hung around for so long, sort of last man standing, been promoted to the top. I became service lead in February 2020. And about 3 weeks later, the UK entered the first COVID lockdown when we were all told to go home, turn our services upside down and deliver them online. So that was a kind of very much shock welcome to frontline management in local government.
Wow. And what inspired you to go to planning? Planning is a degree. So do you have a epiphany, or what led you to want to pursue a career you've done?
There is a slightly odd story. There's always had a fascination with planning from a fairly young age. When we lived in Streatham Vale, there was an ice cream factory at the back of our house. And I remember, must have been about 7 or 8, it burnt down. And I can remember the fire brigade coming and the excitement of the fire being put out. And we all thought we were going to get another ice cream factory. And we did. We got a block of flats. And I can distinctly recall thinking, why have we got flats and not an ice cream factory? And there were issues to do with bad neighbour development and problems with highway safety and noise and complaints. But I remember thinking, why don't things get built that people want to see on a site? And that fascination never really left.
Oh, here we are. Well, if I want to build an ice cream factory, I imagine Wealden would be very permissive as a result. Now, tell us, what does we've had heads on planning on the show before. The sense is that no two heads of planning have precisely the same job or the same role. So, from your perspective, what does it involve on, if not a day-to-day, but a week-to-week basis?
So it really does depend where we are in application cycles in terms of committees. I manage the DM function, which is quite significant. We've got 2 area planning teams, a senior planning team, and then a major applications team. I've got planning enforcement, conservation design, trees, biodiversity. We've also got countryside engineers because Wealden goes down to the coast. So we've got a little bit of coastline protection. And I also lead the East Sussex Building Control partnership, which is a shared service across neighbouring authorities right through to Hastings, Eastbourne rather. So it very much depends kind of where we are and what is the relevant point in the month. I am quite operational. I am focused on committees or 2 area committees. We have with 3,500 to 3,800 planning applications a year, so it's very very busy in that regard. Involved in actual casework, do carry a fairly small but significant strategic caseload. So it depends kind of where we are and what's going on. So sense check reports, we'll be working with colleagues and also presenting to committee as in today. I think we're going to come onto social media a little bit later, but people will know from looking at my posts that I've also been, I've appeared as a witness in an inquiry just recently, 2 inquiries, one which was supposed to close today but hasn't. So very much leading from the front line in terms of or taking the front foot, so to speak, in terms of applications and appeals for the team.
And you on the way sort of up in your career, does anyone tell you how to be a head of planning, or do you just find your own style? Work it out for yourself. What kind of head of planning do you want to be?
I think you do. I think you do feel your way through it. I've mentioned, colleagues that you've worked with previously, including here, but in previous authorities. I think you generally find your way, and you learn from others. So I don't necessarily think you taught it. You learn it on the job, as your way up the ladder, so to speak.
Thank you. Now, Wealden has had its fair share of planning challenges, not in the High Court sense. They've had a fair share of those too, which I've been responsible for a couple, sorry. But the challenge in recent years and difficulties, how have you and your team navigated through these over the years?
So you are right that we've had our fair share of issues. I don't think they're necessarily unique to Wealden. As sort of common across local planning authorities, but for me, kind of dealing with it is fairly simple, and that's by sticking together, sharing work, so sharing goals, talking to one another. We've always been a strong group of colleagues here at Wealden. Lots of us have worked together for a very long time, so you have that experience and throughput of casework, maybe appeals, but application casework. So we've lived through these experiences together, and that helps in terms of managing pressures and the pace of the DM treadmill, which can be ferocious at times. It is here most of the time. And that sort of relentless activity can get people down. And so I think as a team, it's our responsibility to watch for those colleagues that maybe have drifted to the back of the pack, and to watch if they're going to fall and to spot that. And if they are going to fall, then we'll drag them and we'll bring them back into the middle of the pack and to protect them. I think there's two other aspects which are quite important to me and sort of core value that I have and hold in terms of leading the service. And it's compassion and understanding that the staff here are, or could be described as a work family. The staff are people, they all have issues. And I think it's really important to understand those pressures before you can ask a colleague to put a shift in for you. So it's really important that we talk and listen to one another. Now, maybe that sounds easy or it sounds simple and people do it anyway, but it does take time. It takes up a lot of diary time. But I think it's a key part of the workflow that we have regular discussions, regular team meetings, and regular one-to-ones. I think the other matter is very much pushing that there's a no-blame culture here at Wealden. I'm not interested in people pointing the finger and blaming others, and the team don't do that anyway, but it really is okay to make mistakes. And clearly we don't want people to do that. But if that does happen, it doesn't matter. You can keep going. I think it's really important that how you respond to those mistakes. A case in point, I posted just recently that I made a gaffe at planning committee last week. Really big one and a really high profile one. But what are you going to do? Do you bury it? Do you ignore it? Do you bury your head in sand? I don't think you do. You can't. You've got to own it. You've got to deal with it. You've got to move on. And in that case, it was with a report back to committee today. So I think the service lead owning a mistake and being public about that shows the team that it's okay to make mistakes.
Thanks, Stacey. I was going to ask you the question about social media at the end. I'm going to ask it now because you give me two. Firstly, if I may say so, you showed your compassion very clearly in a recent post that I and others noted about a recently departed colleague and had inspired you and others, which I found very moving. But also the point you make about admitting failure, which again you admitting. I'd say cock ups. If not, then Rob will bleep it out. But we all do it. And LinkedIn, for example, we all post about our victories. Don't look how brilliant and strong and successful we all are. Which, if you've not had such a great week, maybe kind of doesn't make readers feel very good. And if I may say so, I think it's that what you do there is really important. But on the issue of social media, you're, as I said in the intro, one of the few people who's almost as prolific on LinkedIn as Chris Young, which is saying, what do you see to be, apart from what you've mentioned already, if you like, internally in terms of team morale and management, what do you see to be the main advantages from a LPA perspective of being proactive on social media in the way that you are?
So I think it's just getting a voice out there and a voice from our side. But I'll come back to that in a second. I mean, LinkedIn is a relatively new thing for me. My account is maybe a year or so. It's not much older than that. And I'll be honest, it did take quite a while for me to decide to jump in. I thought it's just another route where people could object or hassle you or give you grief. And, you know, same with all local government, isn't it? If it isn't the phone, then it's your mobile. If it isn't that, it's your email. If it isn't that, then it's Teams. And I thought, another channel? No, thanks, I'm not interested. But anyway, I was encouraged to make an account as part of corporate branding and reputation of the council. And I noticed quite quickly, as you say, Charlie, that LinkedIn is full of a lot of, dare I say it, backslapping, developers kind of cheering one another on permissions one or appeals one. And I thought, there's no one on here from the LPA side. Let's try and make a splash. And I didn't really think that, you know, I could do anything. I thought I'll put a few posts out there and probably would end up deleting the account, you know, kind of 5 minutes later. But I've decided to post from this side of the fence, not just good, not just bad, but also the struggles and the challenges that we've got, including those people that are really integral and key to the service, but are never going to have a social media account. And it's the support teams and it's the colleagues that actually do the real work, because, you know, I go to committee or other colleagues will be the face of a particular application or whatever, liaison with members, but actually nothing gets done without our support teams, and we are one team. And so it's championing some of those things in order that their work and their commitment, contribution rather, is put forward and recognised. So I don't know. I've had a few comments. Interestingly, the one about the mistake last week has probably got the most comments on there, almost 500 likes, which I don't know if that's a lot in LinkedIn kind of currency. But there you go. It isn't all good, I should say. Charlie, you mentioned court cases. You and I were involved in one. I've dubbed it the case that shouldn't be mentioned. When I posted about that, I got absolutely slaughtered. And it was awful, I have to say. There were lots of comments on there about, why have you done this? You've blocked affordable housing. Surely there was another way around it. I did think about deleting my account at that point. But we did win. We did win, but I got slaughtered on LinkedIn. But a ubiquitous planning lawyer, not that one, Simon Ricketts, but Nicola Gooch. It's really funny. I was in discussion with her about that, around that time, about a different case. She encouraged me to keep going with the LinkedIn account.
Good on Nicola for that. And keep it going. It's really, really good and important. Now, you mentioned liaison with planning committee members. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And what's your relationship with planning committee members like? What sort of relationship do you have with them?
So it's bouncy, I'll be honest. And the main reason for that is in May this year, we returned to completely new council following local elections. And I posted online at the time about standing in the count as the results were coming in and thinking, this is massive change. And it was completely new council, no overall control. What became the Wealden alliance of members, Liberal Democrats and Green Party. Many of those councillors of which had campaigned on an anti-development ticket, and some of them I'd actually rattled sabres with, had formal complaints, had been taken to local government ombudsman. One member in particular, who's now a high profile member, I'm not going to name anybody, but had taken me to the information commissioner because they were upset about a particular planning application. And I'm stood there thinking, how do you deal with this? And I think the answer is relationship building. It's about investing time and energy liaising with these councillors, our new members that is, so that they see all sides to decision making, the entire process, not just the one that they got when they were in opposition. So since May, myself and senior colleagues here have spent huge amounts of time with our councillors, explaining the process, answering questions, unpicking things, what we can do, what we can't do, lots of training. And then the bits in between, the grey areas where we might push stuff, we might push our luck if we're negotiating on schemes. And it's a journey. And I don't think we're there, not completely, but we're a few months in and we're doing okay. A few wonky decisions, but that's part of the course as part of the system. Some overturns, but we're getting there. We had Paz in just recently doing some training. That was a really good event. I think the point is it's a dialogue. It's about talking to members and unpacking things and agreeing on the way forward on how to get stuff done.
Thank you. Then last one question from me for now. Can you give our viewers and listeners a sense of the range, of the substantive content of the work that you and colleagues are doing, of the sort of range of key pressures that you and your team are currently facing in Wealden?
So it's the broad spectrum. It's everything. Our bread and butter cases, of which there are thousands, are householder cases, and we've got a team of officers that deal with that, but right up to the strategic scale of applications, the kind of 1,000+ units, schemes, residential mixed-use schemes. It's all of that. But there's a lot of hidden work, or there's work behind that, which takes up a huge amount of time. So it's the FOIs, you mentioned court action, judicial reviews, letters before claim, which seem to be coming earlier and earlier. And we had one just recently in relation to today's committee on the back of publication of the committee report. We hadn't even sat down with members to air and debate the scheme. So all of that is a massive and significant drain on time, and you need to get it right, because there are impacts in terms of resource and money in taking the wrong decision. So there's a huge workflow underpinning all of our work that takes up time.
Thank you. Then last one for me. Everybody seems to think that the MPPF is coming out next week. Michael Gove has said he hopes that it will, and obviously it's not ultimately in his hands. If it does come out next week, is there anything in particular that you'd like to see in it within the realms of the possible?
So I think it's probably fair to say that the answer to that is, are you asking me personally, or are you asking me as an officer of the council at Wealden? If it's for the council, then I'm going to say housing numbers. I'm going to say that our members would, I'm sure, say that we should move away from housing growth that's linked to an algorithm, and look at numbers as a starting point that's on the constraint-based approach. So it's all the stuff that Catriona Riddell talks about and blogs about all the time. Basically, proper strategic planning done at the regional level. I think the other issue is green belts. I worked at Cheltenham, encircled by green belt, which divides Gloucester and Tewkesbury. And we can all point to lots of LPAs that have no plan and a local policy vacuum that's even longer than the Wealden one. But there's no real consequence to that, because they're sat in greenbelt authorities. So, they've got that protection. Whereas us LPAs that are AONB sites or special landscape designations all have huge swathes of irreplaceable habitat, a forced to accept growth that can't really be delivered without harm. So I'm hoping that there's something in that on behalf of the council. That is.
Thanks, Stacey. Well, maybe, just maybe, all shall be revealed shortly. Now, enough from me, and thank you for answering my questions so candidly and interestingly. Obviously, those have got their questions, and I think we're going to start this time with our roadside correspondent. So, Paul, if you're still there, hiding your car with the flag, your question.
Yeah, tragically, it doesn't warm up the inside of my car in December. Yorkshire. I'm about to put the engine back on because it really is very cold here. And amused only by the fact a bloke has just walked past with a very large dog with illuminated baubles around his neck. So very Christmassy. Excellent, by the way. So, Stacey, my question is, we spend a great deal of time on this show worried about the failings of the system and angst and navel gazing, etc. But perhaps we don't focus enough on the positives. So planning is all about managing change in the public interest, and you're plainly enthused by your subject. So tell me, what's made you most proud during your career, and which single project that you've been involved in has made a real difference? And there's a filing system in place if you talk about ice cream factories.
No, thanks, Paul. So I'm going to say there's probably far too many sites for me to mention that I've been involved in. Using the Cheltenham connection, I was involved in major expansion of the racecourse in 2000, and no, before then, mine's gone blank. But Gozi threatened to call that in, but didn't, because the national interest test was met. Locally in Wealden, I was the case officer for the Wealden Crematorium, which is a multi-award winning facility which we delivered in Horham, one of our villages in the South District. But I think for me, rather than list loads of sites, I would answer it in a slightly different way if I'm permitted to. I've been at Wealden 20 odd years, and people know me, stop me, talk to me about all sorts of stuff. I would say I'm most proud that people approach me and can recall our interactions from years gone by And they'll talk about a situation where we may have disagreed, but they'll say to me, but you were fair and you were reasonable and you explained it, properly. And then, although we disagreed, they felt that they were listened to, and, their interaction with the planning system was with me. And that matters to me more than pointing to a site that's kind of got good design or an attractive place. I was just recently on an inquiry site visit for a big site, which hasn't closed yet, so I'm not going to say much more. A local resident who'd been there every day watched me come out of the site for the inspector's site visit, and there I am putting my boots on in the back of the car. And she wandered over and started chatting to me about the site visit. And she pointed out that I dealt with an application at her house in, I think she said 2008. She said she recalls the time that I spent with her explaining the planning system, the application that was in hand. And I said, I joked that, she was being nice to me because I probably approved it. She said I'd make changes. But she didn't mind, but she understood all of the alterations that were required. I couldn't remember going there. That probably says more about how old I am and how forgetful I'm getting. But I think it's our interactions with our residents and the public which are really important. And so I would point to those.
That's a wonderfully humane answer. Thank you, Stacey.
Isn't it just? Thank you. Sasha, your question.
Thank you, Charlie. Yes, Stacey, in view of what you said, tell us, how serious is the public relationship with your officers and the effect it has on their performance? And if it be serious and detrimental, how can we get a bit of more civility in the planning system than we've currently got?
So that's a good question. And I haven't got the answers. I don't think it's an easy one to answer. I can tell you about what we experience day to day. And again, as I've said a moment ago, probably our experience isn't unique to Wealden. There's lots out there in terms of life on the front line. The experience of local planning officers that are dealing with growth in the face of opposition from residents groups who seem ever more mobilised and able to object, which is fine, but I think it's the manner in which it's done. The social media in the context of, I think it is lockdown, and I don't know why, but since COVID, it seems to have got particularly bad. People feel that it's absolutely fine to go on to social media and harangue officers with, quite frankly, some appalling comments and real personal and derogatory remarks. I've been the victim of that. I still am day to day. There are forums which, if you go onto them, you wouldn't want your children to see it because it's really not nice. And just being aware of that cross team, we can deal with that. I've mentioned the culture that's here and the listening and the sharing and the airing of problems, which we do on a daily basis. It does get people down. Having done it for such a long time, not as long as everyone other people that you could point to, but I've done it for a fair while. I think you get hardened to it. You develop a thick skin. I've always had grief having the girl's name, so I'm kind of used to getting hassled. But in all seriousness,
tell me about it.
It can get people down. I do wonder if the answer is that we should try and embrace it and that we should go out and talk to people. That's dangerous. Not everyone will want to do that, out into the lion's den to talk to residents that are upset and annoyed and angry about an application. But I do wonder whether there's a role where you can narrow those gaps. Ultimately, if you show the human side and you show that you are people, maybe people, objective status, will be less likely to give you such a beating on social media.
Thank you, Charlie.
I still have the edition of the Legal 500 UK bar from about 7 years ago, where the write-up for Sasha told everybody that she'd had a fantastic year on the subject of girls' names.
I get that all the time. People write into the council, "Dear Madam," or if you ring somebody up, "Oh, I was expecting a woman," and I always sort of joke that last time I checked, I was a man. But yeah, I know it's sort of comes with the territory if you've got a girl.
Thank you. Now, Mary, you've got some question about recruitment into planning.
Yes, well, resources really is my theme, because we hear a lot about the difficulties of resources, particularly with planning authorities. So I was wondering what we can collectively do, as it were, to increase the numbers. going into and staying in what I would describe as this great planning profession. I'm, you are clearly enthused by your professional role, the topic area. So are the rest of us. I wonder, what should we be doing? And should, in particular, the public and private sector be coming together a bit more to open up planning apprentices? What do you think, Stacey?
Yeah, so there's definitely something in that, Mary. I could spend a while talking to you about the gaps that we've got in key teams, because they are significant. And to be clear, it's not that there's a budgetary constraint. These posts that are fully funded, but the number of key positions that we need at Wealden to have bums on seats to process applications and deal with key work are vacant. And it's not that we've been to the market once, we've been twice, 3 times, and we're not getting any responses. And it's a real issue, not just in planning, I stress, it's across all outward-facing services and indeed support teams. Building control, I mentioned earlier, we've got something insane like 5 vacancies. It's huge. It's almost a team short. But in terms of what we do to encourage people to come in, we've got to sell local government better, because it's fantastic out there delivering services for our people and making a difference for our people. But there is this block. You asked about the RTPI. There is the apprentice role. We're involved in that. We've got people that are on courses, that are career graded posts. I think the way to tackle it has got to be, I think, grow your own, get people in early, and you can mould them, shape them in order to get them to do the work that you need to do. We have an apprenticeship across Wealden, across different services, not just in planning. That's an annual thing. It's very buoyant and positive. We're lucky enough to have applicants into those posts each year. And we've benefited. We've got permanent staff that have come forward and are now growing even further into those roles. In terms of private sector and public sector collaboration, that's interesting. I've sort of had that put to me a couple of times and couldn't quite get my head around it. But it would be a sort of sharing of resource at times of need, buying in extra resource, not just in terms of instructing consultants, but you could have a situation where people are moved around in order to share the pain, so to speak, in times of need. What we're doing is ensuring that we've got resource across teams. So in the planning service, we've got people working on the local plan, and indeed we've got people potentially coming over to development management. So we're moving our resource around internally in order to help close those gaps.
Thank you. We could have a whole show just on this topic, but I sort of feel I'd love to go into schools and colleges and enthuse to them about this great profession. Anyway,
we had just on that, Mary, we had one of the colleagues here, Sam Batchelor, the development manager, who I have to say, right-hand person. I'd fall over without Sam, but I digress. He went just recently with local plan colleague out to one of the schools. There's a geography course, and we were talking to them about planning. The problem is people don't understand it, or maybe they've listened to their parents that are upset with an application down the road with the field being developed. So they get this on a one-sided view. So maybe there is a role in going out and explaining what we do and the multi-faceted side to local government planning.
Definitely. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I sense a New Year's resolution coming along. There we are. More about that later, perhaps. Thank you. Now, last but not least, Chris, your question.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Just a couple of things, Stacey. First of all, I love the fact that you thanked Robert Lindsay and remembered, and in particular, recognising now that you didn't appreciate at the time what he was doing and what he was teaching. I hope somehow this gets to him and he gets to see that, because what a lovely thing to say, that you were learning without even reasoning.
I'll see him at Christmas. I'm coming to Cheltenham. My in-laws are in Cheltenham. I've still got lots of friends in the town, and we're coming, and I usually bump into him.
Okay,
still there.
We'll pop over here as well.
Yeah, especially at the house over Christmas. Just turn up, it's fine.
Yeah. Any day.
Hey, the family.
Yeah, and the second, that's true, you can just turn up, please. And the second thing is just about your staff. Even though you've got a lovely department, you still can't recruit them, you can't fill the posts, even though the money's there. what about this? My grandfather was a vicar, and if you're a vicar, certainly in those days, you got a house because the job was important. Maybe local authority staff should get a house. Maybe we should start granting planning permissions for local authorities so that key workers just get a house with the job. I think some of our residents would have something to say about that. You probably saw the article in the Daily Mail, or may have seen it at least, a couple of weeks ago, where there was some commentary about how council tax fund money was being spent at Wealden. Not all true, I hasten to add, but it's an interesting point, but I'm not sure it would get off the ground. Yeah, well, I don't read the Daily Mail as much as I should, obviously. My question is, how do you solve the problem of councillors not wanting to produce a plan? Because that's what's going on. They don't want to produce a plan. They'd rather not produce a plan in many instances. How do you solve that?
Good question. I think it's a journey. I've mentioned that already once before. I think you've got to show members the benefits of taking back control and directing what we want and where we want it. The development plan process is subject to evidence, the chance to shape that growth and exactly what we want to see to give back to our communities. I think there's a role for officers in that, perhaps one that we've not been particularly good at or we've done differently in the past, but to go out to our towns and villages and to explain the benefits of having a plan, what it can deliver and how it can hold back hostile applications or those schemes which are not or are not wanted. We've got to collaborate with our residents and explain to them the benefits. I think for far too long, perhaps we've been paternalistic, that we've told people what we're doing and that we're taking a decision that affects them without explaining or being accountable for the reasons behind that. And I think there's something in that. And if you don't do that, then people will rile up and they will oppose it and they will begin to take to social media and object and do the things that we've already been talking about. I think there's another side to it as well, that the residents will know a good deal about their area and their sites, and they'll know about its characters and its natural features. And we can harness that and ensure that growth that comes forward is done in a managed way. There's something around the cumulative growth and the in-combination impacts, things like highways and other key infrastructure. You can only really do it with a plan, so you do it holistically rather than piecemeal, and through the development management process, conveying the significance of that to our members is also key. Again, it's relationship building. It's talking to those members so that they understand the benefits of doing that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you very much. Well, Stacey, thank you for such an insight into the real public service. I mean, they're often used phrases, which we take those words for granted, don't we? And there's some really inspirational light, if I may say so, in the public service that you and local authority planners both at Wealden and elsewhere do. So keep up the great work. And thank you very much indeed for coming on the show. You're a friend of the show and a friend of the industry, and we're very grateful.
But not after planning committee for so long, because my words they sound like they're not coming out correct. So you've got to bear with me. I'm going to open this beer.
Yes, enjoy your beer. Now we're back. We've got one more show, but we think we've got at least one more show before Christmas on the 21st of December, which I think I've got that date right. It's a Thursday, 2 weeks from now, where we have the Attorney General, Victoria Prentice KC MP, who's going to talk with us about the role of the MP and of parliamentarians in the planning process. Had a little chat with her people this afternoon, and she's very much looking forward to shining some insight on that. What constituents are saying in constituency surgeries and that sort of thing, and how should an MP approach the planning process. So that'll be quite an interesting thing to end the year with them. And who knows, we may even have an MPPF by then. Watch this space.
22nd of December.
Stacey, thank you very much again, and enjoy that very, very much deserved beer. Take care, everybody. See you all soon. Good night.